Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Geology 106 with me, Caitlin, your host. The time is 2:58. We're starting a little bit later than usual today. So, I'll wait a couple minutes, though, a few minutes, just to let people find the live stream and log on. Oh, I also need to close the door behind me. Excuse me. I will also put a link in the chat box to the PowerPoint for today's lecture. You'll have to scroll down about halfway. Oh, there was something I forgot to add. It wasn't important. It definitely wasn't important, but I'm going to throw it on there really quick because I can. But yeah, how was everyone's week going? How'd you feel about the exam? I've gotten through about half of your guys' exams, and everyone seems to have done pretty well, so that's excellent. Glad to hear, or glad to see that. But yeah, again, I'm sorry that I didn't quite get through all of the exam grading yesterday, but I did get through most of your guys' exams, and things actually look pretty good. Here's what I'm looking for to add to the PowerPoint. Like I said, it's not important, but I'm going to put it on there anyways. So you guys will want to refresh the PowerPoint in just a sec if you're already on the PowerPoint. I'll let you know when, though. Almost added the thing I want to add. Or make a new copy. Okay, I added the thing I wanted to add. So let me post a link to that in the chat box there for y'all. It is indeed the same link that we used last time. It is the same presentation. This is just the second half of that same presentation. We're picking up on slide 31 for you guys. So, yeah. All right, I see a few of you guys logging on to there. Also, my slide numbers are going to be a bit different from your guys' because I have this is basically like a PowerPoint that I'm modifying for our online course, and there's some stuff that I'm skipping for today and that we're just not going to do as part of the online lecture. So my slide numbers, since I have some hidden additional slides which are hidden on my thing and I didn't copy over to your guys's, and I'm not going to be going over them, but I want them there so that I don't lose them. I don't want to lose the slides. So my slide numbers are basically going to be a little off from your guys' numbers. All right. So it looks like we got 5 of you guys with us. Tell me how y'all are doing while I close the door and close the window. It's super hot in my house right now. I think it never really cooled off from, I don't know, it's been warm lately. Just hasn't been cooling off. All right. Hopefully that makes it a little quieter. Tired, pretty good. Allergies, yeah. Allergies are a thing. They're not a very fun thing. Ooh, well, I hope everything's, Alicia, make sure you don't need an EpiPen or anything. Yeah, definitely keep an eye on that. Not a doctor, though, so I can't recommend a treatment. But I wish I could. So It is 3:03 right now. I think I'll give it just one more half a minute for people to get on. Oh, for the 5 of you who are here, can you leave a comment for me in the chat box as to whether or not you had the time to watch the 2 videos that I posted in our module, the 2 YouTube videos that I posted in the earthquake modules. It's totally fine if you didn't. I really don't care, except for that I may want to show a small couple minutes of one of the 2 videos if you guys haven't seen them. Okay. So I'll probably just show like a minute or 2 of one of those videos then on my phone. And you guys can watch the rest of it later. Definitely recommend watching the rest of it later because they're, it's interesting to me at least to see Mother Nature doing weird stuff or terrifying stuff. It's kind of almost, I will also warn you guys too for the videos that I've posted, particularly the tsunami one, which we will not watch today. We'll watch a couple minutes of the liquefaction one. There is swearing in the liquefaction one, I believe, if memory serves me right. And it is in English. The footage is from the Tohoku earthquake again in 2011, and then the tsunami link in the module, which I do want you guys to watch. It is not, there's no English in the background, but there is Japanese, and it's the Tohoku, again, earthquake and tsunami. And there, if you know Japanese, there's probably swearing in it because these are people experiencing real natural disasters and seeing Mother Nature at her worst. The videos, specifically the tsunami video, can be kind of chilling to watch. Or terrifying. I don't really watch scary movies. That being said, even if I had watched a scary movie, the tsunami video still might be the scariest thing I will ever see, just because tsunamis are terrifying. Like, you really, you think you can imagine one, but then when you see one, you're just like, wow, this is a lot scarier than I imagined it would actually be, I guess. I don't know. At least that was the experience I had the first time I watched it. Quite a few years ago. But I do recommend seeing it because understanding these natural hazards, and seeing these things will prepare you in the unlikely but still possible event that you ever experience one of these disasters. Nature has no compassion for anything at all. Nature is not very compassionate. Nature just does what it does, and it doesn't wait for anybody. So it's really important to understand these terrifying things and know what to do. So if you don't remember anything from my class, like I said last time we met, remember the what to do in a natural disaster stuff, like what to do during an earthquake, what to do during a tsunami, and hazards to look for when you're buying a home. Who thought that one question on the exam was interesting with the photograph of the houses that were built on a cliff? Who thought that was interesting? That's literally somewhere in Washington, in our state, by the way. I literally just Googled houses, Washington State waterfront property, and found that image a few months ago. Don't buy those houses. I wouldn't. I live on a hill, mind you. I don't live on a cliff, but I do live on a fairly steep hill, but it's not past the angle of repose, and there's water retaining ponds to collect water runoff, and for water to seep into. So there's drainage basically. So, I mean, even though I live on a fairly steep hill, it's fine because it's not past the angle of repose, and there's drainage to drain water, and there's plenty of vegetation, in between the homes on the hill. everybody's got yards and trees and things. So, however, looking at that picture on the exam, I don't know. I would not feel comfortable buying one of those houses. I mean, something might not happen in our lifetime, but it's definitely sketchy. And I'm just not about that sketchiness. So anyways, all right. I also do recommend to have the links to the videos in the actual PowerPoint. I recommend you clicking on the video links and like watching it rather than watching me while I'm showing it on the phone. I'll still do that just in case any of you guys don't have the ability to like open a new tab or something because you yourself are also on a phone or whatever. So I'll still play it through here, but my hands have been kind of shaky lately. I think I'm a little tad dehydrated, hence the water. And having a shaky camera makes it really difficult to see what's going on. One other thing too, before we get started on these slides, is I noticed last night whilst grading the exams that I messed up on the last exam question before the extra credit questions. Hooray, there was extra credit on this exam, like 11% extra credit on the exam. I noticed that on the last question before extra credit that I actually messed up when I was writing the exam and forgot to finish the correct answer. It said, what are three things that, or what are the three major provinces of the ocean floor? And as I was typing the right answer, I literally forgot to type the third province, which was mid-ocean ridges. And as a result, everyone got that question wrong, of course, because you didn't click the thing that had only two options when you were looking for three. So that question, it's still there, but I just made it worth 0 points, and it's as if it's not there because it's not worth anything anymore. Because there was no way you could get that question right since I clearly got distracted or something when I was writing my exam. So yeah, I see that several of you guys were wondering about that, and I knew that you guys would. I had a feeling. I'm like, oh, I have so many good students, and I know that they just looked at this and were like, what? Because the one that's missing a third thing is the one that looks right, but it's missing a third thing. So I apologize for that. The three major provinces of the ocean, in recap, are mid-ocean ridges, the abyssal plain, and continental margins in all of their subdivision glory. So those are the three major provinces of the ocean floor. I also snuck in a couple earthquake questions. Everyone did great on those though. And yeah. Anyways, enough about that. We've got 7 people. Let's go ahead and get chatting about earthquakes and tsunamis. So today we are going to be starting with talking about intensity and magnitude. We're only going to talk very briefly about these. Magnitude is a tad confusing because there are different magnitude scales that we use in geology. So we'll just start off with this. What you guys can fill out on slide, what's the slide number for you guys? Let me see. It was slide 31. The definitions that you guys can put in there for intensity would be, it measures the amount of ground shaking based on property damage, right? So intensity is not, there's a number assigned to it, but it's not based on anything, it's not based on any, like, what was the ground, how intense was the ground movement, how much energy was released. It's not based on anything like that. It's literally how much property damage was caused during this earthquake. And different earthquakes have different intensity maps. So you can actually have, like, because not everywhere is going to experience the same intensity and have the same amount of property damage, depending on where you are relative to the epicenter, and where you are, like what is the substrate beneath your feet. So there actually are intensity maps for individual earthquakes. And let's now talk about magnitude. So you hear this all the time on the news. We had a magnitude 4 this summer. We had a magnitude whatever. The Tohoku earthquake was a magnitude 9 point something. So what does that mean? A definition you can write down there is that it is a quantitative measure of energy that was released during an earthquake. And this, of course, was developed more recently. The intensity scale has actually been around for quite some time. Magnitude is a bit more recent, though. And there are two kinds of magnitude. And you guys can probably, I advise making a tiny note in there of this on that slide 31 for you guys, that there is the Richter scale. And that is based on a logarithmic scale. So a magnitude 1 is, and usually I believe it's Richter scale that people are reporting in the news. So a magnitude 1 versus a magnitude 2. A magnitude 2 on a logarithmic scale is 10 times greater than a magnitude 1. So a magnitude 7 versus a 6. The 7 is 10 times, has 10 times more energy basically released in it. Then there's also moment magnitude, which is usually abbreviated as M lowercase or sub W. And moment magnitude is a bit better of a magnitude scale. I believe it's also logarithmic as well. And the reason why it's better is because it can characterize large scale earthquakes a bit better than the Richter scale can. So often in seismology, you see M sub W being reported. Basically, when I say sub W, what I mean, people probably using my own lingo that isn't completely irrelevant, but it's just the way that I would verbally say things in my head when I was in college. Basically, it looks like a capital M and then in subscript a W. That's how moment magnitude is normally abbreviated. And that's what you'll see in geologic literature because it's a far better way to characterize large earthquakes. But anyways, that's kind of just like the brief general that we're going to be doing for like magnitude. We won't really be talking a ton more about magnitude. Although I do want you guys to read up on it in your books. So Richter scale and moment magnitude are talked about in your books. I believe this is how you spell Richter scale. I think that might be what Genesis was asking, was how to spell Richter scale. I think that's how you spell it. If you spell it wrong, don't worry. You can in your book, it's spelled right. And I'm sure that Google knows the correct spelling. Asking me how to spell something is kind of like asking the blind to lead the blind. I'm terrible at spelling. That's okay, though. We all have our things that we're good at, and we all have our things that we're bad at, and that's just peachy, and that's just fine. So let's go ahead and look at slide 32. Slide 32 is talking specifically about the intensity scale. So the previous slide was capital size of an earthquake because you can measure either intensity or you can measure magnitude. So the next two slides are about that first one, intensity, which is a measurement of, property damage. how intense was the earthquake based on property damage. So intensity scales are used for historical records. And as I was also talking about, well, I should first kind of clarify that point about used for historical records, because this has been around so much longer than the science has been around to, provide us ways to measure the amount of energy released. We've been able to forever to, look at the, infrastructure around us and be like, well, this was damaged, this wasn't damaged, a lot of stuff was damaged, or a little stuff or nothing was damaged. So intensity scales, we can go back in time and look at literature and say, in this historical earthquake from an extraordinarily hundreds and hundreds of years ago, we have written records of people reporting how much damage their properties experienced. And from that literature that's been recorded, we can build these intensity maps of historical earthquakes when scientists didn't have the ability to measure quantity of energy released. So we can still go back though and study past earthquakes and say, well, on the intensity scale, they experienced a blah, blah, blah on the intensity scale. They can estimate magnitude, but they can't, the intensity scales help them kind of estimate magnitude. And you can also go back and look for other things, other actual geologic deposits and things that can actually help you identify what a historical earthquake's magnitude might have been, which is how we have basically also assessed that we believe that there was a magnitude 9 earthquake here in the Pacific Northwest. And I can't remember what year it was, whether it was like the 1700s or something. I feel like it was the 1700s. There's literature in Japan that actually talks about an orphan tsunami. So Japan always kept extraordinary records of earthquake events. And so they've been able to go back with using these historical records, these intensity scales, and also looking at things like tsunami deposits, et cetera, and been able to estimate historical earthquake, from centuries ago, like what magnitude they estimate that earthquake was. And they keep these records of there was this great earthquake, this is how much damage there was, and there was a tsunami, or no, there wasn't a tsunami. There was one time where there was no earthquake at all, and they got a tsunami. And that's not right. That's not normal. In Japan, they've always been earthquakes and tsunamis are always associated. They go hand in hand. One time they got a tsunami and there was just no earthquake, and it was very confusing. Well, we have actually found deposits here in Washington that we have correlated to that event and have allowed us, and also dead tree forests, these ghost forests, that have allowed us to determine that magnitude 9 earthquake happened here and is likely what caused, very extraordinarily likely, what caused the orphan tsunami in Japan. And anyways, I could prattle on about that for longer. It's really cool stuff. So the next thing that you can write down there on the bullet point there, though, for intensity maps is, there's the big bullet point that says community internet intensity maps. There's a website developed by the USGS. Yes, tsunami is a Japanese word indeed. Which is why it's hard for Westerners to spell it. So the USGS is abbreviation for the U.S. Geological Survey. And you can actually, after an earthquake, go to the USGS's earthquake website and report, provide your own report of, did you feel the earthquake? Did anything break? Did stuff fall off of the wall? etc. So there's actually these on the internet, there's this community developed intensity map, and you can actually go and fill out these reports like on your own. Just log in, or just, you don't even have to log in. You just show up on the website and enter in your information, and they're like, thanks guys, that helps us conduct our research. And yeah, so I'll actually put a link to that if you guys are interested in the module later. I'll write a note for myself to remember. So these community maps are generated by user input, is what you can write there on that one bullet point. And what you're looking at below there is an intensity shaking map. Blue to white, gray means not felt it. And then going all the way up to red would be like, yes, it was very extreme. We really felt it, and there was a lot of damage. So you can actually see an example of an intensity map there for an East Coast earthquake. Slide 33, there's no notes to take on this slide, but looking at it, this is the modified Maricelli intensity scale, which is kind of the intensity scale. Maricelli developed this an extraordinarily long time ago, and we've modified it and updated it to kind of fit descriptions of modern infrastructure and the types of damage that we would see. And so you can just see right there, like 1 is not felt, a 5 is felt by nearly everyone. Many woke up. Disturbance of, trees, poles, and other tall objects is sometimes noticed. And then you can go all the way down and to the bottom, which was like damage total, waves seen on ground surfaces, objects thrown upward in the air. And yeah, because you can actually see like waves on the ground, kind of like I mentioned previously, where in 6th grade I had the opportunity to see Rayleigh waves and did not. So mad. Anyways, moving right along. This is where my slide numbers get off from your guys' slide numbers. So to your slide 34, you're looking there at another intensity map in the bottom corner. Looks like that might be in Canada or something. No, that looks more like, I don't know where that is. Sorry, guys. Just a random image I pulled offline. So let's talk about earthquake damage, right? So magnitude and other factors determine the degree of destruction. And an area of up to 20 to 50 kilometers, which is about 12 to 31 miles, surrounding the epicenter is going to experience pretty much equal shaking between that 12 to 31 miles around the epicenter. It's going to shake pretty equally throughout that whole 20 to 31 or 12 to 31 mile circle. Everyone's going to feel about equal. However, ground motion diminishes rapidly outside of 50 kilometers. So if you're 50 kilometers away, the farther, the more steps you take to the left or whatever, the farther away you are from it, it's going to extremely rapidly decrease in whether or not you feel any shaking intensity. So earthquakes in stable interiors, those intraplate earthquakes that we talked about, those are felt over a larger area. So You could be a lot farther outside that 31 mile. I feel like they're actually felt fairly strongly for 60 miles. I don't think I have that number on this slide, but I feel like I read somewhere else that it was like you can feel it for well outside that radius, of the 31 miles, and it's going to feel bad. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next slide there with a damaged building on it in the top corner. So earthquake damage is going to depend on several factors. So I got a list here that you guys can write down that's going to affect how much damage happens. First one is going to be intensity of the earthquake. So by intensity, I mean how much energy is being released. Duration, how long is the shaking going on for? What else is going to affect how much damage is experienced is the nature of the subsurface materials. So if you live in a sandy basin like San Francisco versus living up on the hills, the bedrock hills that surround it, people in the sandy basin are going to have a worse day. They're going to have a worse day than the people on the bedrock. And they're going to have a lot more property damage, even though they're, right next to each other. So also the nature of the building materials. Did you use wood? Did you use steel? Did you use bricks? Hopefully not bricks. So the nature of the building materials is going to affect whether or not a structure is damaged. Also, construction practices. So not only what material did you use, but how did you assemble those building materials? What kinds of architectural, structural, whatever it's called, what kind did you use? Do you have like crossbars? Can anyone tell me in the chat if you have taken a class inside the Lake Ty building in Monroe? Anybody? This is important for the next. We're going to talk about it on what slide are we going to talk about that building on? We're going to talk about it in 2 slides, but I'm going to talk about it now, and I'm going to spoil the surprise because I can't wait. Yeah, I was going to, but then the virus. Okay, so we've got 1 yes. Anyone else? There's got to be more than 4 of you guys in here. There's 7 of you. 3 more of you guys need to comment. Have you been inside the Lake Ty building? Specifically in a classroom in the Lake Ty building, because you can see the architecture that I'm about to talk about in the classrooms of the Lake Ty building. And that's why that's my favorite part about teaching about earthquakes in the Lake Ty building, is because they actually do one of the things that we talk about, or they practice building practices there. Anyways, construction practices. So anywho, let's go ahead and move on to the last 2 bullet points, because I don't think I'm going to coax the last 3 of you guys into commenting. Maybe you guys aren't logged in and can't comment. So let's see, what did I leave in blank on that slide for you guys? Okay, the next 2 bullet points are completely filled in, but I want you all to read them and listen too. So flexible wood and steel reinforced buildings withstand vibrations better than other things. I'll save the Lake Ty thing, I guess. So flexible wood, steel reinforced buildings withstand vibrations better. Blocks, though, and bricks generally sustain the most damage. I do not want to be inside a historical brick building that has not been retrofitted. during an earthquake. That is the absolute last place I want to be during an earthquake, like in Seattle. Most of the brick buildings in Seattle have been retrofitted to meet modern building codes that have been put in place to mitigate earthquake damage. So I'm not sure how many unreinforced masonry, that's what that's called, brick buildings that haven't been retrofitted are called unreinforced masonry. I'm not sure how many of those are left in Seattle. So let's go ahead and look at the next slide there. What slide number is that for you guys? 36. And we're going to talk about minimizing damage to buildings. We're going to talk about unreinforced masonry. So what is unreinforced masonry? As I just said, it is a brick building that is not reinforced. So if you look up at the top right photograph there, it's just a brick wall. And there's nothing helping prop it up. They coated it with, whatever, plaster. I don't know what that is, what material. I'm not a construction worker. I could ask my dad. He'd know. He worked in the construction industry. But anyways, there's literally nothing there though reinforcing the bricks. It's just the bricks, and it's not good for earthquakes. Earthquakes destroy that stuff. So how can you reinforce an unreinforced masonry? Well, you can reinforce it with rebar. That's the first of those 2 bullet points there is rebar. And you can see in the bottom right how you would reinforce a structure with rebar. You would basically put a grid of rebar against the brick wall, and then you might put bricks back on the opposite side of it, and that will help support the structure as a whole, right? You can also reinforce with retrofit bracing, and that's what you're looking at in the left corner there. Do you guys notice how there's the side of, they're on the roof of a building there, and they're photographing the facade of the building, that's the wall going straight up, and then there's roofing coming up like this, and they've got these metal bars going connecting the wall of the building to the roof. That's bracing that they have added to keep the wall connected to the roof and to keep things together during shaking. So those are ways that you can reinforce a brick building to earthquake proof it, if you will, or make it safer and less likely to, or make it experience less damage during an earthquake. Let's look at some other ways to minimize damage to buildings on the next slide. And here's where we get to talk about like tie building. So we'll talk about it in the middle bullet point, but first let's talk about isolation bearings. So isolation bearings are what you're looking at in the top right corner there, as well as the bottom right corner. Excuse me. Isolation bearings are found at the foundation of a building, and they isolate the building from the foundation. And they basically allow the building to kind of like be on like it's almost like a hinge point, or just, it's like a bearing that while one is it's resting on top of that bearing, but it separates the two, which means that during an earthquake, it can shift at that isolation bearing point, as opposed to having the entire structure itself just wobble like this. And as a result, what you have is just kind of this type of motion going on in the building during an earthquake. Both, I assume, are terrifying to experience, whether your building is waving like this, because it's not on isolation bearings, or if it's just going side to side from the isolation bearing, like I bet that both are terrifying. However, one is just going to cause less damage to the building. Cross bracing is the third thing you can write down on there. So cross bracing are basically what you have in the Lake Tie building. Let me illustrate it for you guys. So in the Lake Tie building, you can see this really well in their computer room. The computer room especially. If any of you guys have been to their computer room, I mean like that room that's just got all the computers that you can study in and whatnot. So let me get my illustration going here. All right. So I've got a dude here, and he's standing in this room. Make sure I'm in frame. Got a dude here standing in this room. This is one wall. This is another wall back here. And in the Lake Tie building, in some of the rooms, you can actually, I think most of the classrooms, you can see that there are these big, giant, like iron beams that go across the wall in this X pattern, this kind of cross pattern here. And that is called cross bracing. So has anyone ever noticed this in the Lake Tie building before? Go ahead and comment in the chat if you have. That's what cross bracing is. In the Lake Tie building, construction people used that practice in constructing the building. So anyone ever noticed it before? You will now, hopefully, when you go back. Once we're allowed outside again. Aha, Echo noticed it. Awesome. Fabulous. So the third thing that you can do that we're going to talk about on this slide, we talked about unreinforced masonry and what you can do there, but now we're talking about just other stuff. The other thing you can do, and Japan does this. I don't think we do this here in the United States because we don't throw as much money at earthquakes as the Japanese do. The Japanese government just dedicates so much money to earthquake research, researching how to basically stabilize buildings during earthquakes and make sure that they don't fall, because their lives depend on it. Their lives depend on how good their earthquake proofing is. And one of the things that they have done is they have put these gigantic rollers in the tops of their buildings. That's what you're looking at in the bottom left corner of the slide. So rolling weights on roof is what you can write down in there as a little note on that bullet point. Basically, they are these like giant rollers in the very top of the building. It's like, I imagine that it's kind of like a cement long cylinder thing. And basically these things roll to the right and the left, or north, south, whatever. Anyways, I don't really know what shape they are, but anywho, they have these things that basically roll. They're very heavy weights. And during an earthquake, when the ground moves this way and your building's like, oh gosh, the rolling weight in the top acts as a counterweight, and it helps make sure that the building doesn't sway like this as much, basically. And it does help keep the buildings upright. We know this because in the magnitude 9+ earthquake that was experienced in Japan that we've been talking about so much and will continue to talk about, not a single building fell, which is insane. That's amazing. The Japanese have basically solved the earthquake problem in terms of infrastructure damage to buildings. They've solved this issue. They didn't quite prepare for the tsunami though, and that was the problem. And one of the things that they have done that's very effective, again, is this rolling weights in the roof of these structures. Let's go ahead and look at the next slide there and talk about what you can do in your own home. Slide 38. So minimizing damage in your own home. This is so important. Can you guys tell I'm really passionate about like earthquake awareness? What can you do? First thing you can do is you can retrofit your foundation. This is a bit. The next one is like super easy and takes like an afternoon. This one is a more expensive one and you have to like hire somebody to do it, but you can retrofit your foundation. What does that mean? Well, go ahead and take a look at the diagram in the bottom left there. What you're looking at is the walls of a house sitting on a foundation. Most homes are actually not secured to the foundation. Most houses actually do just sit atop the foundation. And in an earthquake, has in the past, they have, just shifted a house off of the foundation, and it's like, well, that sucks. So retrofitting your foundation means adding these kind of metal plates that you're seeing in that diagram that have bolts on one side that attach to the wooden frame of the house that's sitting on top of the foundation. And then the metal continues down, and then you bolt the bottom half of that metal piece to the foundation. So by adding those metal things that bolt the two together, you have helped secure your house to your foundation. Make it less likely to slide off during an earthquake. Not that that will happen, and it would take quite a lot of shaking in order for that to happen, but this is a thing. The next bullet point that you can add there that literally takes like an afternoon of your time and will greatly improve the safety of your home is that you can anchor bookcases and other tall furniture to the wall. And that's what you're looking at on the right-hand side of that slide, those pictures, where people have used a couple different methods to secure a tall furniture or a bookcase to the wall so that during shaking, that tall bookcase or maybe it's an armoire or dresser or something isn't going to fall over. You should also do this, or I recommend doing this even if you have toddlers, because toddlers love to climb on bookcases and dressers. In fact, IKEA had a major lawsuit over children dying because they would crawl up onto their cruddy, sorry, IKEA, onto their not so well built furniture that were shelves and dressers, and climbing up on it cause it to fall over on them. So I do recommend doing this if you have toddlers in your home, but I also recommend doing it because we live in the Pacific Northwest where we experience earthquakes. And if we experience a major one, you don't want like this tall bookcase with a bunch of rocks on it here falling on you. No, I have not secured that bookcase because it's kind of a temporary home for it. However, the bookcases in my living room, though, who are in their permanent home, they're actually built into the wall, which is awesome. It looks so nice to have a built-in bookcase in the wall. It just looks so nice. So I do recommend doing that. Yeah, takes like an afternoon of your time, a trip to Lowe's or Home Depot, and some, screws and some, metal bars, and boom, you're done. So let's go ahead and talk about what you should do to protect yourself when an earthquake happens. What should you do? This is perhaps the part of the lecture that I am most passionate about because I care about your safety and I want you to have the correct knowledge of what to do to protect yourself. There are so many myths out there about what you can do to protect yourself during an earthquake. And it makes me very upset that there are myths out there that we have all been taught, that we all, think are like, well, I've heard this every time I've ever talked about earthquake safety. And it's like, I know, but it's wrong. It's not right. It won't protect you. It won't help you. And even during, did anyone see San Andreas? I think it had like The Rock, Dwayne Johnson in it. So fitting. Puns. Someone, like a group of friends, wanted to go see it. And they were like, Caitlin, come see this movie with you. And I was like, I don't want to. I'm going to hate it. I'm a geologist. So I'm going to hate it. Hollywood doing geology is never good. And they actually perpetuated one of these earthquake myths. Perhaps the most egregious earthquake myth, actually. And I almost stood up in the theater and screamed. I was so mad. So yeah, looks like Echo's seen it. Alicia saw a trailer for it. It wasn't my kind of movie to begin with, and I knew it wouldn't be. It just they don't strike me as very interesting to these disaster videos. I mean, I don't know. But in any case, I literally did almost stand up in the theater and yell no very loudly during one part of it. So let's talk about first what you should do on this next slide. And then on the following slide that we're going to go to next, we will talk about what you should not do. So first, what should you do? If you are indoors versus outdoors, it's different. What you should do if you are indoors is, as that bottom diagram says, is you should drop. That's number one. What does that mean? It means drop to the floor. It means get on your hands and your knees. You should cover. That's the next little bullet point dash thing there. What does that mean? That means you need to try to cover yourself with either a table or with a chair or something like that. You want to get under that table or under that chair. Why? Back a long time ago, this used to be because you did not want the building to come down on you. That has not been a problem, though, for quite some time now, because we have very good construction codes now, and here in the Pacific Northwest, especially in Japan, modern buildings just aren't likely to fall on you. They're not likely to come down during an earthquake. What you are protecting yourself from is everything on the wall. So, for example, I'll just show you in the room that I'm in right now. This easel that I have behind me could fall over and this thing could fall on me. It wouldn't be very heavy and it probably wouldn't really hurt and it would just be annoying. But there are still things that might be heavy like this in the room that would be annoying if it fell over on you. This bookcase and all of the things on it. During an earthquake, the bookcase could fall over and potentially fall onto me, or all the objects that are on the bookcase, even if the bookcase were anchored. All that stuff could be thrust off of the bookcase and fall onto me, and that would be a bad day. So I want to get underneath something so that anything that's falling will fall onto the table or onto the chair that I'm underneath or something like that. Or, for example, I'll turn my laptop even more. I have like a picture. Wall mounted things are also another thing that you're trying to protect yourself from falling over, or even behind the computer. I won't turn all the way around. I have things on the windowsill, sitting on the windowsill. They wouldn't hurt too much, but I guess, if this glass jar thrusts at me, it might hurt. You want to protect yourself from this. Don't do that. This is a spider plant, by the way. I have too many of them. My husband hates it. He's like, get rid of these. I'm trying. I try to pawn them off onto people. Anywho, back to earthquakes. So that's what the second thing is, the cover. The third thing is you want to hold on. What does that mean? That means you want to hold on to the chair or onto the table that is covering you. Why? Because during strong earthquakes, if you're not securing yourself to the object that you're covering yourself with, you can actually be shaken out from under it. Yes, I have actually experienced this in the Nisqually earthquake. It was very difficult for all of us sixth graders to actually stay underneath our desks when the shaking was going on because of where we were in a portable building and not in like an actual building. We were in kind of like a more of like a trailer type of thing. If you know what I'm talking about when I say a portable, a portable building. And so the shaking was a little bit amplified where we were. It specifically just, portables. Anyways, that was it really was terrifying. And I was talking about it with my friends, and all of us were like, oh my gosh, it was so hard to keep my body underneath my tiny little desk. And not be, I kept constantly having to, even though I was holding on, like this part of my body kept sliding out from underneath. So you really want to hold on and make sure that you're still underneath the thing that you're covering yourself with during the earthquake. So that last bullet point there, the biggest danger during an earthquake, as I already mentioned, is falling objects and tall furniture. It's not the building falling down on you, unless you're in an unreinforced masonry building. It's a bad day. So let's talk about what you should do now when you are outdoors. This is different. When you are outside, what you want to do is you want to stay outside. Don't try to go inside or anywhere else. Just stay outside. That's the first thing. Stay outside. Number 2, you want to do your best. First of all, make sure you don't fall over because earthquakes can thrust people from their feet and cause you to fall over. So best you can without, trying to stay low to the ground. Hopefully you don't fall over. If you can get to, anyways, let me just abbreviate it. You want to move away from buildings. And street lights and utility wires. Why? Because these things stuff can fall off of the side of a building. If there's anything mounted to the side of a building, as there often is. Street lights obviously can fall over. Utility poles, that would really be a bad day if that fell over on you since they have electrical wires on them. And they can also cause fires if they do fall over as well. And trees, yes, thank you, Noah. Trees as well. They're not like a good tree should hopefully stay there, but don't count on it. Try to be away from things that could break and fall on you. You want to be in a nice open area away from potential falling objects. Third thing that you want to do if you're outside. The greatest danger, where is the greatest danger outside? It is directly outside buildings. The greatest danger is directly outside buildings, specifically at exits of buildings and along exterior walls, which is like the whole building. Exits and walls. Why? This is because, as I just mentioned, typically signs and things are mounted to the exteriors of buildings. Whether it's a sign promoting the business that's inside of the building, so they'll have some sign hanging off of it being like, hey, haircut's here. That thing that you're all dying for right now. And those signs can fall. Or any other decor or lighting that's affixed to the exterior of the building that could also fall. So you want to actually not run towards a building during an earthquake. You want to stay away from that. Okay, let's talk about the myths. So let's talk about the next slide. Now you guys are going to see things on here that everyone I've ever talked to is like, but I thought you should do this during an earthquake. No. So you're going to see things on here and you're like, what? It's okay. The education system has failed you, but I'm here to fix it, hopefully. So myths about what to do during an earthquake. Doorway. This is the biggest myth that I hear all the time. It's what I thought I was supposed to do as a child until I became an adult and learned otherwise. Why do you not want to go to a doorway? Doorways, in terms of shaking during an earthquake, doorways are not really more safer for you to protect stuff from falling on you. Number one, why? Modern buildings are structurally sound enough that the building itself is not going to fall down on top of you. A lot of the reasoning for why you should go under a doorway is because it is fairly solid and there's a bit more structure in there in the framing of the doorway versus in the middle of a room. And so somehow it should be more stable and less likely for like the home to come down on you there, because people have walked next to buildings that have fallen and they see that like the doorway is still standing because yes, the doorway is fairly structurally integral, but the thing is that we live in 2020 and almost all of the buildings that you guys enter on a daily basis are fine and they will not fall during an earthquake. Your biggest problem is being thrust from your feet while you're standing in the doorway, or having something on the walls or furniture along the walls near the doorway fall on you, or as seen in the picture below, 30 other coworkers or classmates trying to get under the doorway with you, and then nobody's protected. You should not be standing during an earthquake either. Why? Because you're probably going to fall and hurt yourself and hit your head. Don't do that. So don't stand upright for the love of goodness under a doorway during an earthquake. Yes, I know that everyone thinks that this is a good idea and a safe thing to do, but it's not, because you can fall. It's not going to keep the building from falling down on you because the building's probably not going to fall down on you, period. And number two, running to the doorway, trying to get yourself to the doorway is also potentially a falling hazard as well. If you happen to be in a doorway when an earthquake strikes, just hang on to it. Or if there's a nearby shelter, such as a table or a chair, get under that instead. But is it really going to protect you more than a table or a chair? Absolutely not. So let's move on to the triangle of life. This was the myth that was propagated in the San Andreas movie that I almost stood up in the theater and yelled about. I was so upset. It took every fiber of my being to not stand up and be that person in the movie theater. That weirdo. So the triangle of life, how many of you guys have heard of this myth before? Obviously, the person who saw San Andreas heard of it. Echo, you and I have had the misfortune of hearing this myth. This myth also gets propagated a lot in chain emails. I know, those still exist, right? Particularly amongst the elderly, because they're usually the ones who are still forwarding chain emails. Anyone who has heard of it? First, I've heard of it. I mean, and Echo, you may not even remember this in the movie, but there was this moment where, is it The Rock who's in it? Can someone clarify that for me? Because I don't remember now. And it's been so long since I looked it up. But there's a moment where the protagonist, who I think is Dwayne Johnson, is standing up. There's this structure that falls, and a woman is beneath the structure that's about to fall on her. And the protagonist runs over to her and is like, probably yells something like "get down" or something like that. I don't remember. He grabs her and he runs with her towards the wall of the falling structure. And he's, grabs her and runs to the wall, and then the thing falls over, boom, and it forms a triangle. And they're standing right here, nice and safe, next to the tall wall. And it's actually a building exterior too. And it was something that was on the building that fell. And when it fell, boom, formed this triangle on the ground. And the woman's like, oh my gosh, how did you know we would be safe? And he looks at her and he stands up, and there's this great like pause in the movie. And he's like, triangle of life, baby, or something like that. It's really cheesy. Yes, it is The Rock. Okay. So you've seen this movie a million times, really? It's not my kind of movie. I don't want to watch it again. Actually, it probably would be fun to rewatch it, but I do also really love The Rock. I think he's great. I'm not like a giant fan, but I really do enjoy the stuff I have seen him in. Anywho, that was a moment I almost stood up and screamed in the theater, because it is true that these triangles do form. People are not wrong. You can actually go and look at photographs that people have taken after earthquakes, and you can see these triangles where things have fallen over, and something tall will like prevent something from, I'm doing this weird thing with my elbows. You might have like a really tall, sturdy piece of furniture. The slinky is now a tall piece of furniture. And then you might have some other furniture in the room where if it falls, boom, look at that, formed a nice little triangle there. You might have it fall and form a triangle. However, and so people will basically, before I get to the however, people will basically tell you during an earthquake, go and stand next to a really tall piece of furniture, or crouch down next to a wall, a sturdy piece of furniture or shelving or something like that. Because if anything falls, it's going to fall onto the tall thing next to you as opposed to you. Here's the problem with that myth, is that the thing you're standing next to might fall on you. It being heavy means that it will just fall harder on you if it falls. And it's not going to protect you better than a table or a chair. If you're crouching next to a wall, if there's anything mounted on that wall, like pictures or a clock or whatever, that could also fall, and it could hit you where it hurts, like your head or something like that. That's a bad day. So get under a chair or a table and hold on to it. So yes, these triangles do form. However, it is impossible to predict which direction the ground is going to be shaking in. It's impossible to predict which objects are going to fall over and which ones are not. It's impossible to predict which direction any object is going to fall in if it falls. You don't know if it's going to fall to the right or the left, or you don't know. So it's impossible to predict where these triangles of life will form. And besides, like if you're standing next to like a tall piece of furniture and you're standing like right here towards the camera, and I've got this big tall object, which is my phone, and it falls over, what if it falls right next to the thing but doesn't actually fall onto it? And you could get hit. Don't do that. Go under a chair or a table or something else that you can go under that's going to protect you. Run outside. This is another extraordinarily common myth. I saw this summer and it made me so mad. I was watching footage of the earthquakes in California that happened this summer. One of them was particularly large, and I was watching the news. I don't remember which news station it was. It's probably all of them anyways. Was showing this footage that someone started recording in a restaurant when the earthquake happened, and there were all these people in the restaurant running outside the front door, and other people like holding the door open, being like, come on, run outside. You know, there's a problem with that. A, you're on your feet. You could be thrust from your feet, as we mentioned before. Number two, There's usually things on the wall or between or along the walls between you and the exit that could also fall on you in your travels to try to get outside. Also, building exteriors, like we said, usually have signs or like a little like awning or something outside the door that could also fall on you. In the video I was watching from the California earthquakes last summer, this particular video, there was actually an exit sign above the door as per code. In buildings, there is almost always an exit sign above a door. And the exit sign was literally swinging from where it was hanging off of the ceiling. Every person in that restaurant ran underneath this swinging exit sign that looked like it was hanging by a thread. And I actually like wrote the news station. I was like, please take this video down because it's perpetuating the myth of running outside being an okay, safe thing to do during an earthquake, and it will not protect you. That's a great way to get hurt, actually. All of these, so the doorway, trying to get to a doorway, trying to predict a triangle of life, trying to run outside, these are all great ways to get hurt during an earthquake. Don't do that. Get under a table, get under a chair, go to an open area if you're outside and crouch down. Try not to get thrust from your feet. Those are the things you should be doing during an earthquake. All right, so if you don't remember anything from this class, remember that those are literally the points, like how can I earthquake proof my home? How can I protect myself during an earthquake? What should I not do to protect myself during an earthquake? That's what you should remember if you don't learn anything from me. That's the one thing you should learn. All right, let's go ahead and look at the next slide there, which is this cartoon graphic depicting some of these things that we just talked about. First one there being don't run outside if you're inside. Crouch down on the floor. And if near you there is a table or desk or chair, try to get under that and hold on. Try not to be near swinging lights that are hanging from the ceiling. Like that's because those could fall. Try not to be near like bookcases that aren't, even if they are anchored to the wall, they've got stuff on them. Try not to be near bookcases or things like that could fall on you. Just anything that might fall on you. What should you do if you're in bed during an earthquake? If you're in bed during an earthquake, actually the best thing to do is stay in bed and cover your head with a pillow. Unless there happens to be a desk right next to your bed, I would actually recommend, if you are awake and coherent enough, I would actually recommend trying to get under said desk or chair. The earthquake this summer happened so fast, though, that I didn't even have time to put a pillow over my head. It literally was like that. So I did not cover my head with a pillow, though I did stay in bed since my room is too small to have anything other than a clothing dresser and a bed in it. What if it's a bunk bed? I have never thought of that before. I actually slept in a bunk bed as a child too until I was like 5. Joys of being a twin. You have to share a room. Even if you're like, I have a twin brother, so we had to share a room until we were like 5. Let's see. What if I'm not sure, honestly. I think it depends on the bunk bed. The bunk beds that I had when I was a child, I would not want to be near those. Those like swayed just from you trying to get onto the bunk bed. That's not a good bunk bed to like be near during an earthquake. I think that if you are on the top of one such bunk bed, though, you're kind of screwed anyways, honestly, during the earthquake. And so I would just hang on. Yours makes you nervous. Oh no, that's no good. Don't sleep somewhere that makes you nervous. If there were to be an earthquake, don't sleep somewhere that makes you nervous if an earthquake were to happen, because we do live in an earthquake-prone area. I recommend earthquake-proofing your home. And also, I haven't seen the bunk bed that you're referring to, so I could not make a recommendation on it. But now that it is 4:12, we need to move on to liquefaction, and then we will talk about tsunamis, and then we will be all finished for today. So, hazards, liquefaction. What is the definition of liquefaction? I know we already chatted about liquefaction a bit, but we kind of need to give you guys some more workable definitions, something that you can write down, right? So a definition for liquefaction that you can write down there is it occurs when water saturated, loose sand and silt behaves like a liquid due to being shaken by seismic waves. And that was a lot, I know. And some of you guys were like, I didn't get all that. It's okay. I'm here for you. I got you, fam. I will post that bullet point in the comments right there for you. So if you didn't get all that, you can literally copy and paste it from the comments there. All right. So, yeah, basically soil liquefaction it's what you see when you're like, oh, quicksand in the cartoons. That's basically what you're going to be experiencing if you experience liquefaction. So during liquefaction, moving on to the next bullet point there, stable soil that's normally stable soil can become mobile and rise to the surface. So during liquefaction, stable soil becomes mobile and rises to the surface under, given the right circumstances, that it's a lot of unconsolidated material and it's water saturated. The next bullet point there that you guys can write down, which is completely blank, is that soft sediment amplifies vibrations. And this is what I mentioned multiple times talking about San Francisco being in a soft sandy basin, and that earthquake waves are amplified there. So soft sediment amplifies vibrations. And the last bullet point thing that you can write down there is that this causes damage to roads, buildings, and pipes in particular. And what you're looking at there, that photograph below, is a picture from, I believe, the Christchurch, New Zealand earthquake that happened sometime, I don't remember when it happened. It was within the last 10 years. Noah, do you know? You're like a numbers guy. Do you happen to know what year the Christchurch, New Zealand, the big Christchurch, New Zealand earthquake took place? But it was within the last 10 years. And if you look at the following slide, we have 3 pictures there of some liquefaction damage that took place during earthquakes. The one on the top right and the one on the bottom are also from the Christchurch, New Zealand earthquake. I do not know where the one on the top left is from. So basically, literally, it's like quicksand. And you see that more than half of a car is just completely sunk into the ground. And sand will often kind of rise up and cover roads, which is what you're seeing in that bottom picture. And then cars that were parked on the side of the road have kind of sunk into the side of the road, where the sand sort of came up and on either sides of the pavement. Also, it is notable that these locations that are photographed are all near beaches, by the way. That's not necessarily to say that if you're near a beach that this is going to happen to you, because the substrate near all beaches is not deep sandy basin. Sometimes it's bedrock, which is nice during earthquakes. But in any case, and then of course in that top picture, you're seeing that half of the house or of a building structure literally just sunk, a corner of it sunk into the ground. Bad day for those investors. All right, movie time. Yay. So there's 3 movies or videos on this next slide showing liquefaction damage. So 2011, same year as Japan. Oh yeah, that's right. And then everyone was like, are they connected? Are they connected? Not that we know. At least I don't think that we ever determined them to be connected as geologists. All right, so we are going to watch the fish tank demo, which is the first link on there. And we are also going to watch the last link on there, which is the Tohoku Reclaimed Land video. So first, let's start with the fish tank demo. I apologize that in this video, there is some extraordinarily tone-deaf, inspirational music, as well as like hand gestures demoing the thing. And it's because they're like demoing this for people like myself who want to demo this in class. But I thought it was a lot easier, since you guys are already watching a video of me, to just watch a video of this than have me have to set up all of this stuff. So it's still a little tone deaf though, because liquefaction is a terrifying thing. It's not something that I ever hoped to experience, but it would kind of be incredible to experience, but it would still be very terrifying. So let's go ahead and watch this video. So I'm actually going to fast forward a little bit for you guys till about halfway, because for the first part of it, he's kind of setting up the experiment where he pours water in and then he pours the dirt in, and all of the different layers of material. So you can see that the ground is water saturated. Again, if you're able to like click the link and watch it yourself rather than me sitting here, I recommend that. But you can see that he's building. There is moist ground beneath that is loose and unconsolidated, and he's kind of compacting it down there. He is demoing the thing for you. I'm about halfway right now, by the way, in the video, in case you guys are wondering where I'm at. All right, so here we go to the demo. This is a superstructure, aka large building. And here we have a submarine demoing like a car or something like that, I guess. And here he is doing an example of the shaking of the earthquake. And you can see the ground mixing and the water rising up. And you can see the structures and the car submarine sinking. And if you're able to see this video on your own, you will see that the ground up above is wet and everything is kind of mixed together. And so that sand and that top layer was stable until shaking occurred and caused that moisture to kind of push everything apart and kind of come upwards. So that's an excellent video demoing liquefaction. Now let's watch. No, I don't want a 1 month free trial, YouTube. Let's watch an actual example of liquefaction. You guys can see this entire video. This is the one that is linked in the Canvas module. It's also linked there on the PowerPoint. It's the last one there. I do want you guys to watch the whole thing because I don't think I'm going to show you all 3 minutes, but it's crazy. This one, again, there may be swearing, so if you have young ears in the room, you may or if you are at work, you may wish to put in earbuds or issue the other people out of the room, or turn off the volume and just watch.
Earthquake right now.
This is from Tohoku.
It's actually moving. Can you see the cracks moving?
Do you guys see that? Crack widening and then closing.
That crack was not there. The whole earth is moving. I felt like I was drunk. I could see different parts. I could, ooh, wow. There was water just coming up right there. In the ground.
Those cracks
ground
are
is just
moving.
swaying right now. I don't know if you can see this on video.
You guys see that?
It's getting bigger and smaller, going back and forth. And there is water coming up all over in the park right now. This crack is just moving. There's water. I don't know if water lines are broken.
Nope.
But this water was not there a minute ago. It's coming up different places. Here's coming up through the sidewalk.
This is how that sand gets up on top. And
Buildings were making a racket.
Sinks.
I seriously thought I was sick first because I didn't know what was going on. I could just feel like I was disoriented, stepping over another crack. I wouldn't be surprised if the trains are not running anymore. I'm on my way to the train station. We've got a little lake.
All right, so I'll just show that much of it. I really do want you guys to watch the whole thing, though, on your own, because you'll be able to see it a lot better than watching it through my phone to the camera. And it's very spooky and it's very surreal to experience. This gentleman will reveal to you in the latter half of the video that he's on reclaimed land. And I would not want to be on reclaimed land. We're going to define reclaimed land for you, though, in just a moment. In the next slide, actually. So there you have it, liquefaction. So now that I've kind of told you guys about what to do during an earthquake and shown you guys some really interesting videos of liquefaction, let's start talking about the details of it. So on the next slide, let's get you a working definition for reclaimed land. Reclaimed land is artificial land, and it's created by material being placed in areas that were originally covered by water. So essentially, it's taking a bunch of dirt and throwing it into a lake, the coast, off the coast, or whatever, and building out the land. It's like what you do in Animal Crossing when you're trying to build out the lake or the river. You literally just throw dirt, etc., whatever, into a body of water and build up and make fake land, artificial land. Spoiler alert, a large amount of the city of Seattle is built on reclaimed land. That's fun. I'm always terrified, like when I hear about people like, oh, I started a new job in Seattle. And I'm like, I hope it's in the correct area of Seattle and not the bad area of Seattle. Anywho, I'll tell you all about that in just a moment. So the lists there, the bullet points below are basically some spots for you to write in the various kinds of things that people will throw out into a body of water to use to build up new land. Excuse me. So the first one there is obvious. It's loose sediment, dirt or sand. The next one there, the next dashed bullet point there is trash. Believe it or not, people actually use trash to build up artificial land. That's what Seattle did anyways when we were first establishing the city and trying to create more land. Has anyone here heard of the Denny regrade, where they literally regraded a lot of Seattle? They tore down like really tall hills, like took the tops off of tall hills and they threw it into Puget Sound to make flatter land and less hilly land. And I will show you guys where those areas are in Seattle so that you can be informed. So they also would throw trash out there too, though, in the early days. The next big thing that we did, especially here in Seattle, and that people have done in the past, is they have thrown sawdust out. Seattle was a lumber town in the early days. That was our big export, and we would collect sawdust from the mills and throw that as well out into the Puget Sound. Is it safe to use trash? It's not. I don't really think reclaimed land is safe, period. I don't really think reclaimed land is safe, period. I hate being on reclaimed land. I actually did have to go to a wedding. I didn't have to go, but I was invited to some very good friends of ours' wedding in a part of Seattle that I knew was reclaimed land. And I was like, crap. And so I was like, I'm just going to go. I'm going to stay like for as long as I can, but I know what I can do to try to protect myself. And then I'm going to leave. Like, I'm probably not going to stay the whole wedding. And I really do like being in those kinds of social settings with people. So it was very hard for me to be like, okay, I got to leave now. Anywho, personal life of Caitlin. And then the last bullet point there says, etc., because literally at least in the history of Seattle, they literally threw like anything that wasn't useful to them in the sound to create artificial land. So yeah, they even threw like, I went on a tour of underground Seattle, and I heard our tour guide say that they even threw like broken down carriages or dead horses, things like that, into the sound to create reclaimed land. Choice. The photograph that you're looking at there, I believe, is actually a historical photo of South Lake Union, and you can actually see them throwing sediment or putting sediment into the lake there to build out the land into the lake. I feel like that picture might be looking towards like the on-ramp, off-ramp at South Lake Union, kind of looking southeast. I'm not sure though. I don't really know, but I've been in that area quite a bit. So let's go ahead and look at the next slide now that we've talked about what things people sometimes build reclaimed land out of. The next slide here is a map showing on the left-hand side, the black and white map shows areas where the dark gray is where we have put landfill, reclaimed land, landfills of reclaimed land. And then also the kind of polka dotted areas, that's areas of regrade, meaning that's areas where in the past they took sediment from the hills and relocated it to the dark gray areas of fills of reclaimed land. And then we're not going to worry about the black thing that says cuts. We're not going to worry about that today. Now, what I want you to look at next is the picture on the right, which is a black, gray, and purple photograph that I pulled. I think I pulled that off of maybe the USGS's website or the Washington LIDAR portal. the purple areas there, this is again looking at Seattle. You can see I-5 going down, kind of straight down the middle of that land. And then you see the two bridges that go across the lake on the far side. I wish I could like be in class and like show you and orient you guys to the things. But the areas in purple there are all liquefaction hazard areas, places you don't want to be in an earthquake. And if you'll notice, those purple areas correlate to the fill areas. All the reclaimed land is colored purple. Coincidence? I think not. So there you have it. Places in Seattle you don't want to be during an earthquake. This is typically South Seattle. So basically on that gray, black, and purple map, you see the word Seattle kind of in the middle of it. Everything south of there, the word Seattle is literally stamped over basically where Safeco Field is. And everything south of Safeco Field is just not where I want to be. Mm-mm. And then if you blow up that image of Seattle that I'm having you look at with the purple on it, you can actually see that I-5, which for the top part of the photo is just literally straight down the middle of the photograph. And then it begins to border that purple area. So once you get to South Seattle, everything west of I-5, except over on the very peninsula, but all of that stuff there is reclaimed land. It's fake. It's not real. It wasn't there. Mother Nature didn't put it there. We did. And that I-5, where that I-5 is actually used to be the beach. But now when you drive through South Seattle on I-5 and you look westward, you see a bunch of land. None of that land was there. It was all ocean before we started meddling with it. And you can actually tell too when you're in Seattle. It's very obvious if you know what to look for. What you're looking for is flat land. If you go to South Seattle, south of Safeco Field, you will notice that the ground is just stupid flat. Like you could grab a level from a hardware store and set it down on the ground and it would just be level. And it extends for like a great distance. And you're just like, wow, I suddenly feel like I'm on a prairie plain or something like that in the Midwest. This doesn't feel like the Seattle I know. That's because it's fake. And that's the reclaimed land. So next time you're driving on I-5 and looking out at Seattle, you know what to look for now. All right, so that does it for talking about Seattle. Let's go ahead and now talk about Everett. Let's talk about the place that we're at all the time and look at the next slide. That's exactly what that map is. This is a hazard map. I believe a liquefaction hazard map of the Everett area. Excuse me. You can kind of see that orange stripe going through the picture, the large orange band. That is the Snohomish River floodplain. So that's the most likely area to experience liquefaction. Doesn't mean that if there's an earthquake that you're going to experience liquefaction there. No. I also don't think that we have experienced liquefaction there in modern recorded history. However, that doesn't mean that the risk isn't still there under the right circumstances and given an earthquake of the right magnitude. There is still a risk associated. So orange is high hazard, yellow, medium hazard, green, don't worry about it. Like not a hazard. Green is, you're good. Yellow is like, it's kind of a risk there. It's like a low risk, I guess, and orange is kind of a more moderate risk. I would say, though, that these areas, in my expertise, are probably not going to experience as bad a liquefaction as like Seattle could. But my expertise isn't exactly that expert. As a teacher, that means that I chose to kind of stop studying geology like to a certain extent, and I don't work in geology, continuing to learn like more and more. I spend my time like teaching people what I do know. So I'm not that expert, but in any case, that's what you're looking at in Everett. And so there's a map for you if you live in the greater Everett area. You can see all the way down. The map goes down to like Mount Lake Terrace, and then it goes all the way up to, I can't read the city names up there, but it goes past Marysville and Tulalip. And you can see Granite Falls kind of in the top corner there. And yeah, danger zones would be red, but I don't think there's any red on this map. So anywho, there you have it. A map of the area where a lot of us live. Let's go ahead and look at the next slide. And you're going to see these weird things on there. Those are sand volcanoes. Sand volcanoes. We learned about real volcanoes, and now we're going to learn about sand volcanoes. And we also learned about aquifers, and we also learned about impermeable layers like aquitards. So basically, this happens when you have really well-packed soil as a top layer that's kind of serving almost like an aquitard. It's kind of serving like a really hard, tough surface. And then beneath it, you have a bunch of very loose, not well-packed soil. It's very unconsolidated. And there's a bunch of water between all of the loose particles, unconsolidated soil, sand particles. And then during an earthquake, the ground is like shaken either way and cracks develop. And then through those cracks, especially when the ground kind of comes together during the swaying, you will have it crack open and squeeze together, and water will come out and bring with it the sand and loose soil below, and it will develop into kind of a pile, into kind of a cone shape around the spot from which it's emitting. And this is not unlike how a real volcano develops with magma, except minus the earthquake. It's just that they build up in layers, I mean, from the eruption out. And then once all the shaking is said and done, usually there is ground subsidence. So if you look at the first two block diagrams below on the bottom of that slide, you'll see that the ground is actually higher pre-earthquake and during earthquake. And then after earthquake, notice that the ground is lower. That dark brown area has been lowered because literally a bunch of the sediment and the water that was below the ground got shot up through the ground. So now you have ground kind of settling in subsidence. So those are sand volcanoes. And this is basically what we were seeing in that liquefaction video, where there are parts of the grassy area in the park. You've got to watch the video because he gets really close to some of them, where water is literally just shooting up from like a hole in the ground. And it's weird because you'll see the whole field and there'll be several spots and then they'll all just fountain up and then stop. It's crazy. Now we've got just a few minutes left and just a few slides left. Excellent. Because I'm hoping not to go past 5. We're going to talk about tsunamis. So go ahead and take a look at your slide 40. Is it 40 for you? No, it's 39. Go ahead and take a look at your slide. No, 49, excuse me. And you'll see this blue GIF kind of thing there where that's actually a program that scientists developed to model tsunami propagation and how the water in the Pacific Ocean and the waves traveling through the Pacific Ocean and interacting with different land masses would behave should an earthquake initiate in Washington area, kind of Washington, Vancouver, BC kind of area. And you can see that wave, that yellow wave, expanding out from the Washington, Vancouver, BC area. And it's interesting too, because you can see all these reflections once the wave hits like Hawaii, or once it hits Japan or any of the other islands out there. You see these weird reflections kind of kick back. So I was really, I was thrilled when I found that diagram. I was like, that's perfect. Or that GIF. GIF, as some people call it. I call it GIF. Anywho, let's go ahead now and watch a video about tsunamis so that I can get your attention. Because you're all like, I have fatigue, Caitlin, from listening to you talk for so long. I understand. I know. My phone is misbehaving. Sorry, let me get YouTube pulled back up. So this is not the tsunami video that is linked in your, it's not linked in your Canvas module. We're just going to watch it here. It is on the slide, though. It is the one that says Oceanfront Boat Launch. So we're going to start that one, and we're going to start it partway through. For some reason, even though I bookmarked it, the bookmark appears to be lost on my phone. That's okay. I found it right here. All right. So again, this is footage of the tsunami from Japan in 2011. Is this the right one? Let me make sure. Wait a second. No, this isn't the right one. Oh, darn it. Give me one moment here. Those of you who are waiting on me at home can click the link, though, and watch more of the video than we will have here at home, or than I will be able to get up here for you guys. Get it pulled up here because I do really want to show this particular one. It is also kind of chilling to look at. Okay, I have located the correct video. This is a super long video. We are going to start our video about a little over 12 minutes in. Because this video here, this 26-minute video, is a compilation of tsunami footage that people took during the natural disaster. So let's go ahead and watch this one of a boat launch here. This guy who's kind of at a boat launch experiencing a tsunami. Try and get focused here. My arms are going to get tired holding this up. So you'll also see that parts of the ground below him are completely like dried up. and that the boats are just on ground. Oh, here comes the tsunami wave. So it is important because the wave does take a little bit to get in here, but here she comes. So if you guys are on like Twitter or Facebook or something, or Instagram, you probably want to switch back to like my feed right about now. You see the dried mud there, and here's the water coming up. And you can see it crash into the boats in just a moment. And there's the boats. And here comes the water. There's the boats again, just getting tossed around like toys. And it's time to get to high ground. So I do want you guys to actually watch the full length of that. I'm not going to show it to you guys now because we don't have time. But I do want you guys to watch the full length of it because you can actually see in this particular clip of the man at the boat launch that there are these just surges of waves coming in. So it's not just one initial wave that comes in this large surge. There's more waves that come in and cause the water to continue to rise in these surges. So in this video, really captures those surges perfectly. So do give that a watch. Link is there in the PowerPoint. So now that I've hopefully kind of maybe caught your attention about tsunamis, we probably would have had to have watched the video a little bit longer and see more terrifying stuff. But oh well. Let's talk about how to recognize a tsunami and what to do on the next slide. Yeah, I can't imagine being there during a tsunami. That just sounds horrifying. Anyways, how to recognize a tsunami. Number one, the tide will go very far out, relatively quickly. And I want you to bold the word very when you write, tide will go very far out relatively quickly. I've heard stories that people who are of tsunamis that happen in areas where people don't know about, like tsunami hazards, they'll be like, oh, wow, look, the shore went out really far. Maybe I should like run out there and go take a look at like the exposed seafloor that's normally covered by water. And people will actually like go out there and be like, whoa, you know, this is weird. What's happening? What's happening is a tsunami is coming. So if the tide goes really far out in a matter of like a few minutes, you should leave. You should not go out and explore. So number two, after the tide has been out for some, usually these videos are all really long because the tide, in the Japan, the Tohoku tsunami, the tide was out for quite a few minutes. It was just like, everyone was like, all the rivers are dried up. All of the, beaches are dried up really far out. And people did have time to evacuate in this period of time, which is great, that people had time to evacuate. So it'll go out It'll be out for a tiny bit, several minutes or whatever. And then, number 2, there will be a rapid rise in sea level, just like what we saw in the video, where the water came rushing in, and it was quite a bit of water. And it's usually very turbulent water, as we saw. The water that was coming in was quite, it wasn't like a nice lamellar flow. It was a very turbulent flow. So now let's talk about the 2 things you should do during an earthquake, during a tsunami. Number 1, if you see the tide going extremely far out in a matter of minutes, you should leave and go to high ground. So if you see the tide going extremely far out, leave and go to high ground. Number 2, basically, what do I mean when I say high ground? What I mean is a very tall building or a very tall structure is also or if you can't go to a high ground, basically, if you can't leave and get, or say that there isn't much of a topography, elevation, or whatever, or some reason you can't evacuate, get to a really tall building or a tall structure. And in the video that I have posted on Canvas, you will see a lot of people who are not able to evacuate and are not able to go somewhere where there is high ground. They cannot reach high ground in time, but they all do go onto a tall building, and they keep climbing up the building as the waters come in. So yeah, get to a really tall building or structure, or just leave the area and go to high ground. So I can tell more stories, but we don't have time. So let's talk about what kind of causes these tsunamis. Talk about a few of those details. I'm probably going to go a little bit past 5, guys. Sorry. So last result, holding your breath. No, it won't work, unfortunately, because the waters are really turbulent and they're very fast moving. So I don't really see holding your breath actually being very good. Get to high ground, get to a tall building. Don't go to places like, there's a place in Washington that is particularly, I went there for a geology class because we were doing stuff there for a class. And I was like, I do not want to be here because it is an awful tsunami hazard place. It's right by the Washington-Oregon border on the coast, and there is a small strip of land. It is a land spit, or like a sand spit bar that's forming from the Columbia River entering into the ocean. And there's a ton of people who live on this extraordinarily long little sand spit, and they can't evacuate everyone out of there if a tsunami comes. There's too many people who live there. So I was not happy that I had to go there. Anywho, let's talk about tsunami hazards. Megathrust earthquakes. So these are the big villains here. Megathrust displacement is what lifts large slabs of seafloor and displaces water and generates a tsunami. So those are the words that you can write in those blanks on that slide. And in case you missed any of that, there we go in the chat for you. Megathrust displacement lifts large slabs of seafloor, and that displaces the water that's above the seafloor. An excellent example that I heard of how to describe a megathrust earthquake causing a seafloor is, imagine your bathtub being full of water and you suddenly thrust the floor of your bathtub upwards. What's going to happen to all the water in the bathtub? all the water is going to rise up and then shoot out. So, and there's an excellent diagram there depicting how a tsunami would generate at a megathrust earthquake and then, or a megathrust fault line and then propagate outwards. Basically what happens too is as the oceanic slab is like subducting beneath a continental crust edge of a tectonic plate, it'll pull down part of the crust with it, right? And then eventually enough stress is going to build up and that continental crust is going to want to come back to at rest where it's not under stress and being dragged around by the oceanic seafloor. And when it comes back up, it pushes the seawater that was down there in that trench and it pushes it back up. So let's go ahead and fill in some blanks on slide 58. Well, my 58, not your 58. I don't think you have 58 slides. So let's fill in some blanks on slide 53. So a low amplitude wave it travels at a very high speed in open ocean. What does a low amplitude means? It means that the wave, it's not very tall, low amplitude. So a low amplitude wave is generated by this earthquake, and it's going to travel at really high speeds in the ocean, open ocean. So then once this wave, which isn't very tall, so reaches the coastline, it will get bigger because the bottom of the wave is interacting with the shoreline. And as it interacts with the bottom of the shore, it rides up on the shore and it becomes taller as it walks up on land, basically. Because part of the wave is in the ocean, is deep below, part of that wave. And then when the wave interacts the seafloor that's coming up onto the beach, that wave also walks up onto the beach. And it's like, oh, wow, you're twice the size than you were before, you know. That's why in the open ocean, a tsunami isn't just, the wave isn't just tall, but once it arrives at the beach, it progressively becomes like, can become taller and taller. And also, as you're seeing in these video clips that I've linked to you guys of the Tohoku tsunami, you can see that it's not like this one giant wave that comes and crashes, you know, it's really these just surges of water that come in. So what you guys can write in the next bullet point is that the amplitude can reach tens of meters in shallow coastal waters, aka extremely tall, like really tall. The arrival on shore, third bullet point there, the arrival on shore is preceded by a rapid withdrawal of water from beaches, followed by what appears as a rapid rise in sea level with a turbulent surface. That was a very long bullet point. Do you guys want me to repeat it or post it in the chat? I hear post in the chat. That's what I would say if I were you guys anyways. So there it is, posted in the chat for you. Let's go ahead and move on to the second to last slide, where we have some more bullet points to fill out, and we also have some diagrams illustrating waves for you guys. So the first bottom left picture there is showing these circles. The whole length of those circles from the top of the wave all the way down to where the circles end, that's actually the entire wave. So you can see that a wave actually propagates down quite a bit below the surface of the ocean. It's not just what you're seeing on the top. It's deep. The whole moving water goes down quite a bit. The very like deep bottom ocean is actually fairly still, but there is a lot of movement of water on top in those waves. And then what you are seeing on the GIF in the right-hand side is these tsunami waves approaching the shore, and they kind of get like squished up together too. Let's fill in those bullet points though. So a tsunami's trough, comma, the low point beneath the wave's crest, reaches the shore first, and producing a vacuum effect that sucks coastal water seaward and exposes harbors and seafloors. So what is the, let me post that in there for you guys, because I feel you. It's a long bullet point, a lot longer than my other bullet points. So the trough is basically, why am I bothering with hand motions? It's a great question. So here I've got my water. Boom, my ocean water. So this right here is the trough, this low area. So this trough is what's going to reach the shore first. And it's this trough approaching the shore that causes the water to be sucked back out and to form the tsunami. And it is going to come in a series where you'll have wave after wave after wave usually. Boom. So let's go ahead and talk about the second bullet point. A wave crest, that's the high point of the wave, the opposite of the trough. The wave crest behind the trough hits land about 5 minutes after the trough initially encountered. So when that water goes back out, you've got about 5 minutes to get yourself to high ground or onto a tall building. Going inland, by the way, won't help you if it's not high ground. Just so you guys know, the water is going to continue to inundate all the low-lying areas. You need to get to elevated ground, not just further inland. So let's go ahead and check out the last slide there and talk about tsunami warning systems. Yeah. So tsunami warning systems were developed after 1946 when a large tsunami hit Hawaii and destroyed a lot of, I think it was Hilo, a lot of the Hilo area. So what do we what is involved in this warning system? Well, I have a picture there for you guys. Basically, there are seismic observatories. This is what you can write for that first bullet point there. Seismic observatories report large earthquakes. So we have seismometers and observatories all over the planet. And we can tell even if an earthquake went off in the ocean, we'll find out, right? That's awesome. So seismic observatories report large earthquakes. Deep sea buoys detect energy released by earthquakes. So essentially we have these buoys out there that can detect large amounts of energy, like going in through the ocean. And then also we have tidal gauges that measure the rise and fall of sea level. So basically, they can tell, like, oh, hey, like, there is no sea level because it all went out to the ocean. Or like those buoys, they may be like significantly elevated, lowered, right? And that's going to be important to know. So that's a extraordinarily brief introduction into the fact that we do have a kind of tsunami warning system, and it helps. It's better than nothing in forecasting, but it's not an exact science. And that's why in 2011, Hawaii and our state, our coastal area, went on a tsunami warning system. And I was honestly terrified because my sister lived in Hawaii at the time, going to nursing school there. And so my family was freaking out, wondering if my sis was going to be okay, because I was still in community college at this time and didn't know anything about tsunamis. But everything did end up being fine, and we did not have a major tsunami either in Hawaii or in Washington. There was a small rise in sea level, so baby tsunami did occur, but nothing terrifying, thankfully. Yay. So anyways, that concludes our lecture. We went to about 10 minutes over what I kind of wanted to. So that concludes earthquakes and tsunamis. Make sure you guys watch the videos. Please watch the videos so that you guys have an idea of what these natural disasters look like, because you never know where life takes you, and you never know what Mother Nature's gonna do. Quick question, yes. This week's lab, does the triangulation range have to be precise? Fairly precise. Very small triangle. If your triangle is larger than a state, your triangle is too large. I have seen this as well. If you have like the tiniest of a triangle and it's not bigger than one of the states on the map, that's okay. Or bigger than the average state, that's okay. I have seen triangles on some people's labs come in and it traverses it encompasses 3 states. And I'm like, this is not good enough. I hope that. Can we do a Google chat if that's possible? Absolutely. Mega tsunamis can also be caused by coastal. I wouldn't say that. I don't know if they're mostly caused, mega tsunamis, if they're mostly caused by coastal or island landslides. But yes, landslides can cause tsunamis as well. I hope I also answered your question, Alicia. You can also, if you're not sure about your lab, feel free to email me a picture, and more than, few hours, please more than a few hours before the due time for your lab. And I can take a look at it and be like, yeah, that's accurate enough. So have a great week. If you would like to join a live chat, I know that Genesis wants to join. Noah would like to join. Would anyone else like to join for a live chat? I probably don't have too long today, given that it is 5 p.m. I will get the live chat started. Boy, it is warm in this room because of the computer and because of me being in it. I'm also emitting heat, as humans do. Excuse me. All right. So it seems like I just have 2 requests for a live chat. I'm going to do a live chat with Genesis first, and then Noah, I will send an invite to you probably in about 10 minutes. So Genesis, I'll send an invite to you, and then we'll talk for about 10 or so minutes. And then Noah, I will send an invite to you after that for about 10 or so minutes of chat time. And then I will have to go after about 20 minutes total. So for now, I will end the live stream, and I will see you guys next time. Have a great weekend. Bye.